I'm Arvin Vohra, and I'm going to respond to President Obama's State of the Union address from the perspective of a libertarian, a small business owner, and an educator. There was a time in the past where if you were competing for a job, or if your business was competing against other businesses, you were competing with somebody who had a similar background from you, somebody who maybe lived in the same neighborhood, who went to the same type of schools. But in the modern economy, that's no longer the case. You're competing with people from other countries, from Japan and China, India, Germany, England, France. All of those people now are all of our direct competition. This is not an issue only in manufacturing, because manufacturing jobs are actually the hardest to outsource. With manufacturing, you have to deal with shipping and tariffs and international laws, but when it comes to outsourcing white-collar work, you don't have to do any of that. I can speak from personal experience. The programs that I work with, some in America, some outside of America, I've never met any of them. My lawyer is actually based in Chicago, I think, though I've never actually met him in person. My graphic designer, a very close friend of mine, is based all the way in California while I live all the way here on the East Coast. And the thing is, there's nothing to stop that graphic designer from being based in Asia or South America or even Antarctica. See, with the internet, there are no borders or international laws that really matter when it comes to white-collar work. Really, anything can be outsourced. And what President Obama has noticed, as most of the thinking world has also noticed, is that in order for America to stay on top, our education system has got to be competitive. If our students cannot compete with students from other countries, then we will not be able to have the strongest economy in the world, because every single one of those jobs is going to go to a different country. So in identifying the problem, President Obama has identified it brilliantly. And yet, his solutions that he suggests are somewhat, in my opinion at least, very questionable. See, when it comes to his own personal decisions, I believe that President Obama makes excellent decisions for education. He has chosen an excellent school for his daughter, Sidwell Friends School, which is right down the street from where I'm sitting right now. And when students from Sidwell Friends School have trouble with their education, they generally turn to the private sector of education. For example, many of them come to actually this room right here. This is the main classroom of Arvin Vohra Education from which I'm giving this address. Many students from Sidwell Friends and similar schools like that come to this room right over here. But where students from competitive private schools in this area never go is they never turn to the public sector. They never turn to the government. They never turn to, for example, Republican and Democratic governors, because if you wanted to make a list of who knows the least about education, probably Republican and Democratic governors would be close to the top of that list. Oftentimes when I need a bit of insight on a particularly nuanced or difficult bit of education, either in software design or curriculum design, I'll turn to teachers who have expertise in certain areas, or other educators, or even software developers. But who I'll never turn to is to a Republican or Democratic governor. And yet that's exactly who President Obama recommends that we turn to in his race for the top. The race for the top to me is one of the most ridiculous examples of reinventing the wheel that I've ever heard of. We already have a race for the top in education. It's called the free market. You see, in the free market is by definition a race to the top. You come up with different ideas, and your competitors come up with ideas, and you come up with new ideas, and you're competing against each other to, as President Obama likes to put it, race to the top. That's what the free market is in every sector. It's that race to the top is exactly what has made Intel and AMD, both American companies, both private sector companies, become such success, become the most powerful computer chip manufacturers in the entire world. Now, part of that free market is allowing that free market to compete, to innovate, allowing people in that free market to innovate. President Obama is right. We need innovation. If our education system is going to be the best in the world, we need ideas and we need innovation. But the question is, where does that innovation come from? Innovation comes from the mind of that kid in college who has some amazing idea and just wants to try it out and put it into practice. That was the story of Bill Gates and the founders of Apple and the founder of Facebook. The innovation comes from that person who is working at a job that maybe they don't like that much. Maybe they're stuck in that corporate world and they feel that they can do something better. And so they come up with an idea and they put it into practice. That's where innovation comes from. Where innovation does not come from, where innovation never comes from, is that college kid who wants to try this great idea, but looks at the mountain of regulation that he has to face and decides to give up before he even begins. You see, the enemy of innovation is excessive regulation. Now, of course we need correct regulation, but we need to make sure that our regulation is not ridiculous. In Maryland, the state where I'm sitting right now, you have a strange situation of an excess of demand for private schools that's higher than the supply. We have more people who want to go to private schools than there are private schools. And on the reverse side, in terms of private education, like SAT classes and learning centers, we have more learning centers than we have demand. So if you guess that this is an economic inefficiency, then you're right. But the question is, how did that happen? And I'll tell you exactly how it happened. Maryland has a law that says that you cannot have a private school in a private house. No matter how big or grand or elaborate that house is, you can't have a private school there. Now the question is, who's benefiting from that? Obviously, the public school teachers unions are the most obvious choice for that. And it's interesting that when President Obama is talking about how we need to cut spending in different areas, how we need to reduce the special tax breaks that we give to millionaires, which first of all we don't, they still pay the highest tax rates of anybody, he leaves out the very people that we're spending the most of our taxpayer money on. Education, we spend more almost as much on education as we do on the military. They're about the same. And yet, although our military is the best in the world, our education is nowhere close. The group that President Obama seems to have forgotten when he's talking about cutting spending is, of course, the teachers' unions, the National Education Association. This group was analyzed in the recent movie Waiting for Superman, which really illustrates just how pernicious effect this group has on education right now. In the free market, we have certain rules in that free market, and we need to keep those rules. And one of those rules is that predatory pricing is illegal. And to explain what predatory pricing is, it's like this. Let's say that a huge company, instead of selling their products at the market price, or even for the price that they paid when they bought those products from the suppliers, sells those prices for much lower. What that would do is it would drive out the competition, because those small businesses, they couldn't survive during that 3 or 4 month period, those 3 or 4 month, that lean period that the large companies sort of forced on everybody. Now, of course, the large company can take that hit, but those small businesses, they cannot take that hit. So what happens is predatory pricing drives out those small businesses. So we as a country have correctly made that practice illegal in every sector. And that's why one of the reasons why every sector in America, whether we're talking about computers or software or products or innovation or fashion or whatever, we do so well, except for in the one area where we do allow predatory pricing. And that area is in education. Education companies, the public education companies, public schools, have effectively driven out any low-cost private school because it's very difficult to compete with something that's free. But not only have they driven out those private schools, those private entrepreneurs that work in education are actually forced to pay into that failing system. They're not given a choice. You see, if you don't like a normal business, you can just take your business to a different business. You have the right to say, I'll take my business elsewhere anytime you see a business that's not fulfilling your needs. But with education, you don't have that option. You're stuck unless you happen to have enough money to go to a private school, which the top 1%, including President Obama, have taken, many of them have taken that option. What I've supported over the last years during my campaign is something called a voucher system, which allows individuals, no matter how rich or how poor, to take their business to a private educational institution and to benefit from all the amazing innovation of those private educational institutions. President Obama added early in his speech that as evidence that the economy was recovering was that corporate profits were up. Well, that's hardly a surprise. President Obama, himself one of the main supporters of the Wall Street bailout, insisted that normal taxpayers, individuals, and entrepreneurs give our money to corporations. Under that system, how could corporate profits not go up? President Obama added one point that the government needs to spark the creativity and imagination of our people. That's not something that the government can do. The spark of creativity and imagination, that comes from us, that comes from individuals. All the government can do is block it. And right now, with the massive regulations on small businesses, especially with those that are related to the new healthcare plan, that's exactly what the government is doing. It's getting in the way of the creativity and imagination of the people. He added that each of us deserves a chance to shape our own destiny, and he's absolutely right. Each of us do deserve that chance. But we deserve to be able to do it without having to face such a complex mountain of regulation. I remember when I was starting my business, Arvin Vohra Education, I went to the state licensing board to make sure that everything I was doing was completely above board and properly licensed. And the licensing was so complex to set up a tutoring business, which is all it was at the time. This was before software or anything else. Was so complex to set up a tutoring business that even the licensing board didn't really know where to turn.